After serving for 4 years as the City of Charleston's Director of Traffic and Transportation, Keith Benjamin is saying goodbye. He talks to me about his accomplishments and what's next for transportation for this edition of Quintin's Close-Ups. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my YouTube channel and like Quintin's Close-Ups on Facebook. Keith Benjamin.
Hey,
Yes, good to see you.
good to see you too, man.
Yeah, welcome back to Quintin's Close-Ups.
Appreciate it, man. Appreciate it. Good to be here.
I appreciate it greatly. Obviously, you are the City of Charleston's Director of Traffic and Transportation.
I am.
And I want to go back to the Charleston City paper because Sam Spence wrote an article about you, obviously your developing news. He says this, quote, Keith Benjamin is working his last few weeks as the City of Charleston's Director of Traffic and Transportation. He told the City paper Tuesday. And I know tomorrow, unfortunately, is your last day.
Yeah, man. You called me right before.
Yeah, right before.
I had to do it because, you know, you were the first one that I did when I came down here. In fact, before I moved down here, 3 or 4 folks said, you gotta talk to Quintin. Like, what's going on? And so you were actually the first one that I ever did in the city. So I think it's only right, the day before the last day, to come back and have a good conversation. So,
who is Keith Benjamin now versus 4 years ago?
I think I'm still committed to community. I mean, that's why I'm in transportation in the first place. You know, I talk regularly about the fact that my entrance into the transportation field was very non-traditional, right? And so it was through policy, and it was through advocacy. It was through this idea of people making places and being conscious of that within the decision-making space. And so that piece has not changed. I think what has been a great benefit is to be in a position where I call it where you own a door, where you have this opportunity to open minds, open spaces, open opportunities in significant ways, and that to me transcended more than just the everyday transportation work. And I think that privilege and that opportunity that the mayor and council gave to me is something I'm very grateful for.
In that decision-making space, Keith, what are the policies and advocacies right now going on that are being made?
Well, I think there's a lot of different things that we had an opportunity to do, and I had an opportunity to engage in. I think primarily for me, it started with our citywide transportation plan that we passed. When I came on board, the negotiations to make that citywide plan occur were already in place. The funding was allocated, and the process for getting that done was already in place. It was my job to execute on it. And so the fact that you can turn to page 8 in that plan and see a statement on transportation equity that focuses on how we're supposed to view transportation and what that looks like is something that I'm really appreciative of, and something that I think was kind of the baseline of how I then pursued the rest of my time in the position, right? I thought it was important that in a document that was going to be voted on unanimously by council and adopted into our zoning code, and then also adopted into the long-range transportation plan for our Tri-County Council of Governments, that there needed to be a statement that defined what transportation was, who it was for, and making sure that our decisions were always through a lens of equity.
What is your statement now about transportation in the city of Charleston?
Well, I honestly believe that we have expanded our definition of transportation, and more specifically, not necessarily discovered, but revealed the who in transportation. I think in my line of work, it's very easy to focus in on the what, right? You know, what's the cost? What's in the way of getting a project done? What is it going to take to persuade a stakeholder or whatever that is? But we lose sight of the who, right? Who is benefiting from the opportunity? Who is going to be able to take advantage of space? Who's at the decision-making table? Who's a part of the procurement process?
Right.
Like all those different things. And I think if we focus in more on the who and then the what, I think that gets us to a better place.
And you said this too, mentioning the mayor and council. You said this to the city paper, quote, "I cannot say enough about the opportunity the mayor gave me 4 years ago to not only lead the Department of Traffic and Transportation, but represent the city in facing various challenges with equitable mobility, economic development, and community engagement. Let me ask you, Keith, what data and qualitative information do we have today, and what can we realistically, that is, gather from those data?
Yeah, I think it depends on what mode of transportation you're talking about. One of the things that's been a privilege for me, yes, I am director of transportation for the city, but the mayor asked for me to serve in his stead on the Aviation Authority Board, on our transit board, on our Tri-County Council of Governments, and various other different committees and initiatives that are going on both here in the Low Country but around the state. And that really gave an opportunity to merge what I call the quantifiable and the qualifiable together. In transportation, we are zeroed in on the quantifiable, like what is the level of service,
yes,
how many pedestrians are crossing the street, and these measuring tools make predeterminations for the type of treatment that we do for a particular transportation mode. If a bike lane goes there, if we add additional flyer service, if we change a route of a transit line. But bringing in the qualifiable, I think, is important. Those are the stories, those are the lived experiences that people are having on the ground every day. That's what we hear from when stakeholders get in touch with us, right? And so I think being able to occupy those spaces allowed the merging of those, right? Here's what we're actually hearing on the ground. Here's where it matches with the data. How can we bring those two together and make concrete decisions? I think that piece is beyond important for how I make that case. I mean, that's one of the biggest reasons why we were able to do so well for the Ashley River Crossing and get that federal grant. Yes, you know, it was about the over 200 plus stakeholders that are engaged. Yes, it was about the congressional delegation that stepped up and said, hey, we want this to be the priority project for the state, because in that year that was the only project funded through that federal program in the state. But it also was the data. It was the fact that in those 3 years prior that we had measured, there was over 100 bike and pedestrian accidents and issues within a 1 mile radius of the Ashley River bridges during that time. It was the fact that with the addition of that project, there'd be over 70,000 jobs that would be in a 20-minute walk or bike radius to that particular location, right? It was the cost benefit in that ratio for it as well, right? So the data spoke loudly, and we were able to merge that with what the people wanted to see as well.
Let me pivot for just a second, Keith. What disparities exist today, and how do policy options help address those disparities?
Yeah, I think we got to be honest about that, right? In the city of Charleston, we still are the #1 city for bike ped death and injuries. The vast majority of them are black and brown folk, right? Well over 43% of them, even though our city is only made up of about 20% African American. The vast majority of our transit riders today make $45,000 or less. The vast majority of our transit riders don't own a car. Right? The vast majority of our transit riders are of color. Right? We have to be honest about those numbers and that data, and utilize that in our decision making for what transportation looks like in the future. Because the fact of the matter is, 2 of our most pivotal projects that are occurring in our region, so $400 million bus rapid transit system connecting 3 different municipalities to our medical district, and a $20 million bike and pedestrian bridge that is going to unlock our entire system of bike and pedestrian access throughout Charleston County. And so who is that for? And how do we make sure that as we're taking on new policies, as we're about to embark on a new bike share system that's going to include e-bikes and otherwise and things like that, like that we're conscious of who's that going to be serving and making sure that they're able to be a part of that conversation too, right? That not only checks the box of equity, that checks the box of accessibility, workforce development, it also checks the box of safety, right? And so those things all go hand in hand, and we have to be honest about those disparities and address them head on.
And I had my first experience with the e-bike on Friday. That was amazing.
Yeah, it's
going
a good
20
ride.
miles. Yeah,
It's a good ride. It's a good ride. It's a good ride. It's a good ride.
Yeah, going down the Ben Sawyer Bikeway and in the Old Village and 20 miles an hour. I'm like,
But if you think about it right now, and this is a credit, this is not all the credit to the city of Charleston, it's a credit to partnership with the state DOT, specifically partnership with Charleston County. Once that Ashley River Crossing is done, now you have connectivity to the Greenway and the Bikeway, and small projects along the Greenway that are occurring. Then you have main road work that's occurring. that's going to have its own dedicated bridge span for biking pedestrians that's going to connect and get all the way down to the new park that Charleston County Park System is doing.
Yeah.
You go the opposite way through West Ashley.
Sure.
And you have 7 and 171 and all the work that's going to happen there. The collaborative efforts for North Bridge that are going to come together. And let's not forget, even though LCRT, Low Country Rapid Transit, is focused on transit, there's non-motorized accessibility that's included in those as well. SEDOT with their 526 project is included. So you're talking about now systematic change that's thinking about multimodalism and in a pivotal way, and all these different agencies working together to make that happen.
We're still in the midst of COVID, unfortunately.
We are.
How has COVID exacerbated and exposed those inequalities that existed in these communities?
Yeah, I think the best way for me to describe it is my extreme gratitude to our city workers. You know, COVID-19 was happening, but that did not change our parking enforcement officers, or I should say ambassadors, having to be on the street helping people get from to and fro. It did not stop my signal crews who had to respond at 2 o'clock in the morning to various different emergencies and make sure that the streets were still moving. It did not stop our traffic operations crew members who do signs and markings and responding to stakeholder pieces. So yes, COVID is a real, but the essential workers kept our community going, and more specifically our city workers. And I can't be more prouder of those men and women who came into work every day, who adjusted to our city policies for how they should ride in vehicles and the type of mask they should use, and what their social distancing looks like, and how they still get their jobs done in different ways. I think what COVID showed was how dependent we are on so many different people in the municipal government, in hospitality, in education, in healthcare, and how we need to treat those folks, right? And how we need to uplift them with services that they need, and otherwise. I remember the 20 bus goes up and down King Street, and many people don't know, even though it's labeled a 20 bus, it might as well be an extension of the Dash, because it's free.
Yeah.
And you know, some decisions were made in the midst of COVID to cut back some of the routes that were underutilized or may have had drastically lower ridership than usual. And so there was no malice behind that decision that was made by Carter. It was literally looking at the numbers and making a decision. But one of those routes was the 20. And that route being cut completely eliminated the Rosemont community from being able to get to the food line on King Street. So as soon as that route was taken, all of a sudden we started hearing from the community saying, hey, we can't get to the grocery store anymore. And thankfully Carter stepped up immediately and made that adjustment. But I think it really exposed the ways in which we have to be conscious constantly about our community and making sure that we're serving everybody and not just some.
And how do you improve time and space efficient movement of people and goods?
Well, I think that's something that we've been doing. You know, I don't want to reiterate the projects that we're working on, but you know, one of the things that I hope gets improved along with all the varying different transportation efforts that are going is how we improve what's called the first last mile. And so there's a whole lot of, you know, you could talk about the park and ride efforts that you know, BCD COG is doing. You could talk about not just bus rapid transit, but our fixed routes and improvements that are happening not just on the peninsula, but off the peninsula. There's some changes that were made on James Island to do some improvements there. We could talk about the different ways in which all those different modes are working together. But many of those modes get to a specific destination, and people still might have a quarter mile, a half a mile, 2 miles still to get to wherever they're trying to go, especially if they are not utilizing an individual motor vehicle. And so the way in which we cause mode shift, we address congestion mode, mitigation, is to make it easy for people to choose other modes of transportation, not harder. And one of those biggest ways is to fix that first last mile. So if you decide to carpool with a friend to get over to West Ashley, and you carpool to a location, but there's a park that you want to get to, what's going to easily get you from that set location to that park, right? That might be a mile away, or might be a half a mile away. And that's where micromobility comes in. That's where the bike share comes in. That's where the e-bikes comes in. That's where e-vehicles, low-speed e-vehicles come in. And what does that look like for us here in Charleston, right? We're a different place. Our texture is different of how our roads look, how people interact with them. But it's something I think that needs to be our next step, especially as we introduce mass transit to the downtown core.
How should the city support workers in the transportation sector to achieve healthy working conditions, fair labor practices, and living wages?
Yeah, I think that's a thing that I'm hopeful they do. It's something that in the city, I know our HR department has been adamant about. Just a couple of years ago, they did an across-the-board increase in salaries for city staff, and I'm hoping that continues. As somebody who has the lowest paid staff in my department, it is something that I think is critical for people to live. We not only want people to work hard for our city, we want them to live and enjoy the very city that they're serving, and that means that they have to have a living wage with that. And so I'm hopeful that the efforts that HR, our Human Resources Department, has been doing for the past couple of years, and that council has been deliberating on, is something that's taken into consideration. Those people have served us. I have PEOs who served the city for 25 years. I have Signal crew members who started at the city the November after Hurricane Hugo, right? People who have given so much to our community in significant ways. The least we can do is honor them with a living wage.
Absolutely. And speaking of which, you said this quote, it was with both the mayor's and council's openness as well as the commitment of our over 60 employees in the department that allows us to move the needle in the right direction when it comes to transportation for all and not just some. What do you hope the mayor and the city council will be open to for and when it comes to innovative transportation in Charleston?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we are going to have a larger conversation about is the same way that we've had significant conversation about our stormwater infrastructure, we're going to have that same conversation about our right-of-ways, our roads. And yes, the vast majority of our roads are owned by the state DOT. Right. We partner with them constantly, and they've been amazing help to me in my time with the city to get so many different things done. But the truth of the matter is, literally every council meeting, we are accepting new infrastructure in that's in accordance with various different projects that we're doing. And so, what exactly does that look like? How do we maintain that infrastructure? How do we innovate and utilize that infrastructure? There's not much more we can build. There's not much more we can widen. And so how do we maximize our existing infrastructure? That's something that's going to take partnership, but it's going to take some innovative thinking as well. I also think, and this is something that, is not the sexiest of topics, but, we did pass a comprehensive parking study in 2019. It was the first in 2 decades. And there's some aspects in there that go hand in hand with mobility. If we can maximize our use of the curb and make sure that it's as accessible as possible, but also helps us meet varying different goals, I think it can help us on the mobility side as well. And so my hope is that some work around that can significantly happen. The other piece, and this is something that we've talked about with our police department and also with our bike and pedestrian advisory committee, is how do we make sure that our roads are as safe as possible? Is that through the full adoption of our current complete street resolution into a complete street policy? Is that through automation of enforcement at various different locations where we're having high speeds? Is that better education processes and encouraging processes for how people should interact with the road and what that should look like? I think all those varying things have to be explored, and it's going to take a lot of partnership to get it done.
And what should be the future partnerships when it comes to these ideas and goals?
Well, I think a lot of those partnerships exist, thankfully. I was reminded of a conversation I had with a Charleston County employee when I first came on board, and he sat me down and he said, there's all this history between Charleston County and the city, but that doesn't mean that has to be our history. We can start on a new clean plate, and I think that helps move so many different things in significant ways. Like our city staff, county staff, and SCDOT district staff meet literally every other month to strategize, to coordinate, to figure out how we partner, what exactly that looks like. In fact, one of the most immediate examples was our response to the unfortunate, untimely death of the pedestrian on Upper King Street near the recovery room. Soon after that, we coordinated with the state DOT, was able to conduct a road safety study. We then partnered with the county, and we're actually going to be putting forward a request to the CTC, the Charleston County Transportation Committee, to actually do a comprehensive look at King Street between Line and Hugie Street, thinking about relocation of signals, better pedestrian access, light, like all those different things. But the fact that we're able to get that done is because of the collaboration of all those different entities and not us working in our silos.
That's amazing. Well, I didn't want to be tough on you today.
You can't, man. It's the second to last day. What questions are you even meaning to ask?
I got a whole lot here,
but this is what I'm here for, man. You can hit me with a couple. It's all good.
No, I'll let you go easy.
Okay.
I mean, this was fun for over the past 4 years. And I thank you for coming on Quintin's Close-Ups.
Yeah, no problem, man.
And thanks for your service to the community.
Of course, man. It's been an honor. I don't take it lightly what it means to be in this position, and what it represents, and the opportunity that mayor and councilor gave, and to the staff, man, especially our management team. Judy, Robbie, Troy, Parrish, Tyrone, Stacia, Thomas, James, and formerly Michael. Those folk are just good people. I think you could talk about the work and different things that have been accomplished and awards and millions of dollars and all those things, but I've had an opportunity to just work with good people.
Yes.
And that makes a difference in your day. That makes a difference in getting things done. And so it's really been a privilege.
That's amazing. Thank you again.
Yeah, definitely.